Hello, and thanks for joining us on UP Responds. I'm Jennifer Hales with UPTV. It will soon be time to commemorate our nation's great heritage. Many people celebrate the 4th of July with a barbecue and a fireworks celebration. As you begin planning your festivities, we'd like to help you understand the University Place fireworks laws and give you some great prevention information so you can make the 4th of July a safe holiday for you, your family, and your neighborhood. With me today is Michelle Johnson, Public Education Lieutenant for UP Fire. Thank you for joining me, Michelle.
Thank you.
All the warnings about safety and about fireworks aren't meant to discourage people from celebrating, but our priority is to have an injury-free holiday all across the state, really, in the nation. So can you tell me a little bit, let's start off, I know we're going to cover a lot of material today, but can you tell me a little bit historically, how does University Place stack up to other areas in our region?
Well, sure. Well, in 2008, we had 7 fireworks-related calls, and in 2009, we tracked our fireworks calls again, and again, it was 7 fireworks-related calls, with obviously our highest number of calls coming on the 4th of July, the holiday itself. And 3 of those calls, what we need to think about, those 3 of those calls were significant brush fire related calls with exposure to residential housing and apartment complexes, meaning the brush was burning towards a heavily populated area.
Ooh, yikes. No good.
No.
Can you describe the types of injuries that are mostly prevalent or that mostly UP Fire responds to during this time of year?
Well, we fortunately have not had any injuries. Fireworks related, all been fire related calls, but across the state last year there were 200 injuries reported by fire departments or emergency rooms that were related to fireworks. And then the leading type of injury is the burn injury. And then after that is what we classify as trauma, which includes lacerations, amputation, and fractures. And why those are happening is usually between 18 and 14-year-old males, and it's lack of supervision or tampering with legal fireworks.
Sure, and that answers my next question, if there's a demographic that you see more injured, and you said it was this
18 to 14-year-old males, and those injured, a third of the people injured totally were under the age of 15.
Okay. Yeah, that's definitely something for parents to be looking at if you've got boys, and whatever boys, why their fascination with fire, it seems to start real young. I know you also handle other elements of prevention for folks, but for children, but certainly something to be paying attention to and monitoring that age group. Yes. Anyways, so I know the fire department is also responsible for checking the booths in the city and making sure that they're meeting the code and doing what they're supposed to do to tell fireworks. Can you talk a little bit about that pre-sale inspection and what's included there and what the requirements are?
Sure. Well, we process the permits for a booth in University Place, and typically we have between 6 and 9 stands in University Place. And our prevention division will go out on June 28th and we will inspect the stands. We try to get the stands inspected by noon because state law allows the stands to open at noon once they've had an inspection and received their permit. So we're looking for proper exiting from the stands, whether it's a stand where only employees are or if it's a tent where the public is allowed to come in. We want to make sure there are enough exits, the exits aren't blocked, that we have proper signage, no smoking within so many feet, no cars running with so many feet. There has to be barrier tape up, which prevents the cars, hopefully prevents the cars coming close to the stand. Fire extinguishers, make sure the posting of the permit is available. They have access to call 911. They have their address posted. We're also looking to make sure that there are legal fireworks in the stand. We do a quick check to make sure there's nothing that stands out to us as that is not a legal firework. And if we have any questions, then we can contact the distributor or the state on that issue.
Sure. And so you mentioned that at noon on the 28th, that by state law they're able to open in University Place and across the state, really.
Yes.
So in University Place, when are they legal to sell?
To sell?
To sell.
As soon as we issue them that permit, then they can start at noon on June 28th through 11 o'clock that night. And then from the 29th through July 3rd, they can also go from 9 a.m. to 11 p.m. And then on July 4th, we allow them to go from 9 a.m. to 12
Sure.
midnight.
And I think folks can, obviously, as they're out and about doing the grocery shopping, they'll start to see the stands
Yes.
preparing and getting ready to pop up. And one thing I think is really important for folks to remember, that if they buy fireworks in University Place, they're legal.
Yes.
Those are legal fireworks. And so if you don't leave our city limits and buy them outside, then you never have to wonder whether you're buying legal fireworks.
Right. If you buy them on the reservation, you are not guaranteed to purchase something that is legal.
Right.
And if you take it off the reservation and bring it to University Place, there's no guarantee.
Right. So folks are purchasing their fireworks in University Place, they take them home, and they've chosen a proper location, which I'm sure you can shed some light on what that might look like. And what are some safety tips that you'd like them to remember when they've got the fireworks and they're at home, when they're ready to go?
Well, the first thing is, before you use, you need to be prepared. So we encourage people to talk to their neighbors. We would really like them to talk to their neighbors, let them know what we're going to do, put their pets inside, have a water source, a hose, a fire extinguisher, have a clear area free of combustible materials.
Mm-hmm.
Don't light them right near all your brush or your flowers or your garden or up near the house. Have a free and clear, safe area. Then while you're using, have one designated adult to use the fireworks, have them light it, and them only. Back away from the fireworks. If it's a dud, you need to dispose of it appropriately. And then afterwards, that's one of the main issues is you see a lot of complaints to the police department is clean up. Be respectful to your property and your neighbor's property. And first thing in the morning, get up there and clean the neighborhood and clean everything up. And during the evening, make sure you're checking for any spot fires or anything like that.
Right.
And be polite.
Yes, and I really like what you said about talking with your neighbors first, preparing, and then making sure that everybody that's at the fireworks show understands who's doing what, so that we don't have any, people that we're expecting to be lighting off fireworks simultaneously. I think that's really important. I like that a lot. One of the things that I've heard you talk about before has been sparklers. Mm-hmm. And I know this is a big one we put in our kids' hands, and we light them up and we let them run amok. So why don't you talk a little bit about temperature of the sparkler?
Well, that's a hard one for me as a fire safety educator, because all year long we teach kids if they find matches or lighters to tell an adult, don't touch them. Mm-hmm. Adult needs to put them away. These are tools for an adult. We don't use matches, we don't use lighters. And then on one day of the year or a couple days of the year, we stick an item that burns at over 1,200 degrees in their hand and let them swing it around and potentially burn themselves or catch their clothes on fire and other things like that. So parents need to consider that. I have a couple of statistics what it burns at. Water boils at 212 degrees. A cake bakes at 350 degrees. Wood burns at 575 degrees, and glass melts at 900 degrees. And so we're putting a sparkler that burns at over 1,200 degrees in a child's hands, which can cause third-degree burns easily. So, and nationwide, number one injury is from sparklers, and 20% of all our injuries in Washington state come from sparklers.
Really important information for parents as they're gathering fireworks, purchasing legal fireworks to prepare. So I know that the information we've talked about today will be on the website. I know that, but I'm sure there's some other resources that you might have for folks online where they could go and learn about safety measures.
The best place to go for any local shows is the Washington State Patrol's Fire Prevention Department, and we'll list their website, and you can go on there and they will have a list of all the current shows that have been passed along to them where you can go. So we're encouraging people to go to a public display and leave it to the professionals.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Michelle, for being with us today.
Thanks
I know that
us.
the citizens in our audience at home will be very interested and pleased to have some good information about how to prepare for this season. I appreciate you being with us.
Thank you.
Great. We'll be back in just a moment.
A single ember that escapes from a wildfire can travel more than a mile. You can't control where that ember will land, only what happens when it does. Get Fire Adapted now at fireadapted.org.
And we're back talking with our next guest, Sergeant Greg Primo from University Place Police Department. Thank you, Greg, for joining us today. Happy to have you. So we talked with Michelle before our break about the kind of the fire prevention type of stuff and what folks should be considering as they're lighting off fireworks. But what I'd like you to talk a little bit about is the ordinance itself and some of the restrictions and how the enforcement component will be working again this year. But before we get to that, let's talk a little bit about how our community in University Place stacks up to other communities in Pierce County.
Well, statistically, at least for the last few years, we've seen calls for service related to fireworks to the police department drastically going down over the last 3 years. And in my experience of working law enforcement throughout the county, University Place is pretty compliant with the ordinance. We do have pockets of areas within the city that have some problems, but for the most part, in general, the city is very compliant.
Right, that's good to hear. So tell our audience at home when it's legal to discharge fireworks in University Place.
In University Place, July 4th
Right.
is the only day that you can discharge the fireworks.
Folks need to really focus on that. You can buy those fireworks before the 4th of July. You just can't shoot them off until the 4th of July. So
Correct.
that's something to really, really make sure you stress with your kids. If we bring them home and we put them in a pile somewhere, we can't light them off until the 4th. Is there an age restriction on discharging fireworks?
Well, there's a restriction in terms of you have to be 16
Right.
to discharge it by yourself. Under the age of 16, you must have an adult directly supervising the child under 16.
Yes, yes. And that'll be an enforcement piece too.
It will.
Yes, okay. One thing to seriously consider when you're lighting off fireworks is, obviously folks should be doing them, in their front on their street, outside of their own home. And what are some places where they should absolutely not be shooting fireworks?
Well, any city park is the main thing. And I know a lot of parents would probably think we'll just go down to the local park and there's an open area, so just go ahead and go down there and do it. But no city parks, fireworks are not allowed there. Any city, of course, or government-owned facility.
Right.
And the school grounds, you
Right.
need to stay off the school grounds with the fireworks.
Right.
Stay at home, that's the best place
That's
to
the
do it.
best place. And also, in the apartment communities, they may need to check with their management,
Right.
make sure that it's okay, that they light fireworks off. And certainly, after hours business locations, we wouldn't want to have folks out there in the,
No.
somebody's vacant lot shooting fireworks
Right.
off. That spells like trouble there. So, and one of the things that I found over the years with the whole fireworks thing is there's people on both sides of this issue very staunchly. There's the folks that love fireworks and look forward to celebrating the 4th of July every year and have a massive barbecue and a family get-together, a neighborhood get-together. And it's a tradition, and we have folks that are on completely the opposite side that absolutely hate fireworks, can't stand them. And so it's a real difficult position for law enforcement to be in because we've got to enforce the law, and fireworks are legal on the 4th of July, but also try to maintain some sort of a happy customer, so to speak, and try to make everybody happy, which can be very difficult, and oftentimes we're put in those circumstances. But one of the things I want to stress to folks is to really talk with your neighbors, know what to expect. And I think from our perspective, if you know that, the Smiths that live next door have a fireworks party every year, then you need to expect that that's going to happen this year on the 4th of July. And I realize that a lot of people like to go to bed at 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock, but they're legal to shoot off until midnight. And so while we're trying to enforce the illegal components of whether they're underage or whether they're illegal fireworks, I think it's really important for neighbors to take responsibility, and especially with staffing levels as we've had a reduction in our city, to talk with their neighbors and manage expectations and know what to expect. Wouldn't you agree with that,
I would
Greg?
agree. We ask people to maybe be a little flexible on that day of when you need to call for police assistance. We're there for the dangerous fireworks or the illegal fireworks, or when people are in danger or
Right.
property, and ask people to be a little flexible when they call to make sure it's something that they really think police need to be involved with. If you're aware that your neighbors are going to throw a big party and have fireworks, and maybe you have dogs that are going to have problems with it, there's things that you can do to alleviate those issues for your dog. Maybe go someplace else for the day, or or something like that.
Or talk to your vet.
Yeah,
you know, talk to your vet about it before that if you know your dog has trouble, and many dogs do. So that's a good point. I appreciate you bringing that up. So is University Place Police Department heavily staffed or more staffed, or what's our staffing makeup for this time of year?
We will increase the staffing for July 4th. We'll have 2 additional officers on that evening, not just to handle fireworks though. Along with a 4th of July celebration comes all the other kinds of calls associated with partying. So you'll have the intoxicated people, and partying sometimes develops into fighting. And so we'll have 2 additional officers to just help with everything that's going on in the city that night.
Tell me what if someone were to confiscate illegal fireworks, and if an officer were to find them and confiscate them and write a report and make an arrest, can you tell me, just for our audience to understand, how long that might take to actually, get the fireworks, take those fireworks and make an arrest, write a citation? What start to finish, what are we looking at? An hour, 2 hours?
Oh, it would take an hour at a minimum.
Right.
Between collecting the fireworks, and then of course we don't drive around the city with a bunch of fireworks in our cars. We have to go back to the station to properly have them housed for somebody else to come pick them up for disposal.
So really important.
So yeah.
For folks to recognize that it's not, it's not like
It's not a traffic ticket.
Yeah.
Where we just run up and throw a ticket out there.
Yes.
So.
Great. I'm glad we discussed that. So we've talked about staffing. One of the things I also wanted to mention was that every year when our guys make contact the previous year with folks that have been in possession of illegal fireworks or have been discharging them outside of the legal times, that we keep a list of those folks, and we do send a warning letter that goes out. Here, it should be going out shortly, where we let folks know, we've been contacted last year by law enforcement, and if you're recontacted this year, you will be issued a ticket. And that seems to help with our, what might be considered chronic offenders. And so we really encourage folks to report that if it's a chronic, escalating emergency type of situation. And we're going to talk with Dave Loverack next after our break, so he can fill in the gaps there. So we've got the proactive contacts, and is a person illegally discharging fireworks, what can they expect in terms of fines and that sort of thing?
It's a misdemeanor offense. It's actually a criminal offense to illegally discharge, whether it's possession of illegal fireworks or discharging when it was illegal to do so. So it's criminal, not a traffic ticket.
Okay, good to know. Okay, and you mentioned earlier, we talked a little bit about pets and about what to do. And as the animal control manager, also, I want to advise our audience at home, if you do have pets, to make sure and contact your vet. And there's plenty of resources online about what to do during this time of year. And I find that many of the people that are on this side of the fireworks issue, whether they don't love it, if they hate it frequently, it's because their pets have such a rough time. So really want to encourage our audience to do that ahead of time. Sergeant Primo, it's been great to have you. Thanks for joining us today and talking about fireworks enforcement. I hope that our citizens will think a little bit about that, what we talked about, that neighborhood piece, really talking with neighbors ahead of time to help eliminate some of the issues that our patrol folks face on the 4th of July. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
We'll be back for a moment. Thank you for staying with us. We're back with our fireworks show, UP Responds, and with me is my next guest, Dave Loverack from the Law Enforcement Support Agency, which is otherwise known as 911.
Right.
Dave, thank you so much for being with us today.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Jennifer.
You bet. One of the pieces that we have traditionally not done with our fireworks show has been the 911 piece of the whole prevention and enforcement strategy, and it's a really important piece, and so I'm so glad you agreed to come with us today.
Me too. I'm glad to be a part.
Yes, the 4th of July, I know, happens to be the largest call volume day of the entire year for 911, which it just absolutely blows my mind. So can you Can you tell us a little bit about how that is and how that works?
I'd be glad to, yeah. We are just blasted with calls on the 4th of July, and it's sort of like a bell curve. If you look at the stats concerning our call count, it begins to escalate a few days before the 4th, peaks on the 4th, and then tapers off as people continue to burn off their residual fireworks. And just lots and lots of calls. And you see those calls are in addition to all of the regular calls that we would normally get if it wasn't the 4th of July.
It just is extraordinary to me that it could be that many. And do you find that, and I'm not sure statistically if anything has been done, but do you find that many of the calls are legitimately illegal, fireworks calls, or are many of them just, I hate fireworks and I'm going to call every time somebody's shooting fireworks off in my neighborhood?
Well, it's some of both. When there's just an excessive amount of noise in anyone's otherwise tranquil neighborhood, that's always going to tick somebody off,
Sure.
and usually tick off a lot of people. And even though you can anticipate the 4th of July, and as was mentioned earlier in the show, that's something that you can take into account and make plans for ahead of time, it's still irritating to have your peace and tranquility disrupted on that day and on all the days leading up to and following the holiday. And so, a typical day for us would be one where during the nice summertime when the weather's great, we get about, in the mid-2000s, maybe 2,600 calls a day. But that goes up statistically and historically by about 1,000 on the 4th of July. So on the 4th of July, you can expect between 3,200 to 3,600 calls from midnight to midnight. And so it dramatically escalates and impacts our ability to effectively respond.
Sure. And do you notice that like when the darkness hits, do you notice that it starts to really peak, or is it just consistent throughout the day?
It's consistent, but yeah, it does increase once it gets dark and the fireworks are more spectacular.
Yeah, sure. And folks can't see anymore.
Right.
You can't see whether those are legal. And let's face it, many of the legal debate, there's a lot of stuff that looks like it could be illegal,
or
but
ought
it's
to be.
not, or ought to be.
Exactly. Right.
If a citizen believes that somebody's illegally discharging fireworks, and either they've seen something illegal, or and maybe you can elaborate a little bit more on what the protocol is, how you'd like them to respond, what number you'd like them to call, all of that.
Sure. The standard for calling us on the 4th of July is the same as it is the rest of the year. If it's a life and death situation or any circumstance where somebody's life or property is in immediate peril, we want you to use 911. And if you're not sure, we would rather have you err on the side of caution and dial 911. But as many folks already know, 911 is not the only way to reach us. We also have a 24-hour non-emergency number that we prefer people use if it's not a life and death or an imminent threat. And that number is 253-798-4722. And that dials directly to the same communication center, the same consoles, the same people like me that are answering 911 calls. But the situation is this. Our phone system is rigged in such a way at the 911 center so that 911 calls ring and are answered first. And that's what you want, because presumably a 911 call is an emergency and deserves an immediate response. And so people calling on the non-emergency line are going to wait at the end of the electronic queue for all the 911 calls to be answered first. And for that reason, people calling the non-emergency number might sometimes listen to it ring and ring and ring and ring for a while. And that just means that we're pedaling as fast as we can to catch up and keep up with all of the ringing 911 calls first, because we certainly want to handle situations where people are in immediate medical need. They're having a heart attack, or there's been an injury car accident, or there's a violent domestic, or all of the other things that keep happening even on the 4th of July. Those things need and deserve immediate attention. And so that's why sometimes the non-emergency number may ring for a bit. And if that happens, I hope people won't be discouraged and think, well, I'm calling an empty, dark office where they've locked the doors and gone home. You have a couple of choices. When you call the non-emergency number, you can either listen to it ring and wait until we answer, because we will, or you can hang up, give us a few minutes and call back. Hanging up on the non-emergency number is okay because we don't get a readout. There's no 911 screen when you call the non-emergency number. And for that reason, it's a great number to use, especially if you want to maintain your anonymity. Maybe you don't want there to be any chance that your neighbors know that you called and ratted them out for shooting off those illegal fireworks from the reservation. And so use the non-emergency number, and you can remain anonymous. We'll still enter your call. It'll still get the same attention as if you called on 911. But if you're using the non-emergency number, you're not tying up a 911 line that may be used by somebody else that's having a real life and death emergency.
I'm so glad you talked about the anonymous piece, because I can't tell you how many times, not just related to 911, but I get this call about I'm not going to call. I'm not calling because I'm afraid my neighbor's going to find out that I've called. And So I'm really glad that you talked about that, not just for the sake of fireworks.
Yeah.
But going back a little bit to talking about, just generally expectations in the neighborhood and this expectation of peace and tranquility and this whole idea about the 4th of July extending till midnight and it being legal for folks to shoot those things off. One thing I did want to mention is I have noticed that when the 4th of July falls on a weekend, there does seem to be a little bit of a decrease in those calls. But when the 4th of July does fall during the week, smack dab on a Wednesday or a Tuesday, and that expectation is I have to get up on Thursday and go to work, and I don't want to be up until midnight shooting off fireworks. And so going back again to when we talked with Greg, Sergeant Primo, earlier in the show about really talking with neighbors and understanding those expectations so that we don't clog those 911 calls and continue to be that escalating high volume day for the year, we can really stave off a lot of those issues.
That's right.
And manage those expectations early.
Maintaining a sense of community with your neighbors is so critical year-round, not just on the 4th of July, but the 4th of July is probably one of the most important times to communicate with your neighbors, especially if you're going to be hosting a wild party. And it doesn't have to be wild, but if you know it's going to be loud and it's going to be lots of spectacular fireworks and lots of people, lots of traffic, lots of vehicles clogging the streets and things that just might cause some irritation and some inconvenience for your neighbors. Be considerate, give them a heads up, talk to them. And these are people who hopefully you have a relationship with throughout the year because they're the same people who you'll want to talk to before you leave on vacation. Hey, keep an eye on my house. If you see anybody suspicious hanging out, give the police a call for me. Maintain that kind of rapport by being considerate at this time of year.
That's so important. And I also want to encourage folks, if you know that if you see these illegal fireworks starting to stack up before the season, certainly give our office a call. At my office is 798-3141. I would encourage folks to call me ahead of time if you see those illegal stuff. We can make time to do a proactive interaction there before it gets to you and before we tie up that officer for an hour to 2 hours of making an arrest that night. So we certainly want to be in the loop early and try to stave off some of those issues ahead of time.
Right.
So I'm so glad that you came today, Dave, and shared that message with us. It's really important for folks to understand how 911 works. I know we've done a show in the past and had some really good information. So thanks again for joining us today.
You're welcome, Jen. My pleasure. Thank you.
And thank you for watching UP Responds on UPTV. For more information about fireworks safety, check out cityofUP.com. For a list of public displays, visit wsp.wa.gov. For UPTV, I'm Jennifer Hales. Have a safe and happy Independence Day.